The federal government did not immediately react to the secessions. Lincoln had not even taken office before the seceded states had written their new constitution and begun capturing federal forts within their boundaries. But soon came an action they could not ignore. 6 days after South Carolina seceded, and under the cover of darkness, Major Robert Anderson had moved his regiment out of the indefensible federal Fort Moultrie and into Fort Sumter. Both forts were in South Carolina's Charleston harbor, but Sumter, still under construction and previously unoccupied, controlled the entrance to the harbor. Anderson was in a better position, but he and his 80-odd men needed supplies, arms, and reinforcements. President Buchanan ordered a civilian merchant vessel, the Star of the West, to be used to make the delivery, hoping it would be seen as less antagonistic to the Confederates. But as the Star of the West approached Sumter on January 9, 1861, cadets from the Citadel, who were manning the artillery battery on Morris Island, opened fire. Batteries from the now Confederate-held Fort Moultrie joined in, and the ship was forced to withdraw. When Lincoln took office in the first week of March, he was dismayed to learn that Anderson, now becoming a hero in the Union, only had enough rations to last 6 weeks. By now, Confederate Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard had built up a powerful force within the other harbor forts to challenge Anderson. Negotiations over the next month failed to improve the situation. Lincoln insisted that the Southern states had no right under the Constitution to secede, and that, in fact, they simply could not leave the Union. Therefore, any discussion of turning over or selling U.S. forts to what he considered a false government could not take place. The situation at Sumter was becoming dire. Rations were running out. Lincoln's position was delicate. On the one hand, he did not want to take aggressive actions that might push Virginia and the other states of the Upper South out of the Union and into the Confederacy. He still hoped that this crisis of secession would not turn into a war. On the other hand, if he surrendered Sumter in the face of military threat from the newborn Confederacy, that might give the insurrectionist government too much legitimacy, so that he would never be able to bring its states back into the Union fold. Lincoln informed the South Carolina governor on April 6th that the federal government would attempt to resupply Sumter, but no men, arms, or ammunition would be included except in case of attack. Confederate President Jefferson Davis ordered General Beauregard to demand Anderson to surrender Fort Sumter. If Anderson refused, Beauregard was to order an artillery strike. On April 12th, Anderson informed Confederate Colonel James Chestnut that unless he received new orders or supplies, he would surrender the fort at noon on April 15th. This was not the unwavering promise that Beauregard was looking for. Anderson was told that Beauregard would open up with artillery within the hour. Abner Doubleday, a captain serving under Major Anderson, later wrote about the incident.
19 batteries were now hammering at us, and the balls and shells from the 10-inch Columbiads, accompanied by shells from the 13-inch mortars which constantly bombarded us, made us feel as if the war had commenced in earnest. Our fort had been built with reference to the penetration of shot when the old system of smoothbore guns prevailed. The balls from the new Blakely gun on Cummings Point, however, had force enough to go entirely through the wall which sheltered us, and some of the fragments of brick which were knocked out wounded several of my detachment. The firing continued all day. They had a great advantage over us as their fire was concentrated on the fort, which was in the center of the circle, while ours was diffused over the circumference. The night was an anxious one for us. The batteries fired upon us at stated intervals all night long. We did not return the fire, having no ammunition to waste. By 11 a.m. of the next day, the conflagration was terrible and disastrous. 1/5 of the fort was on fire, and the wind drove the smoke in dense masses into the angle where we all had taken refuge. It seemed impossible to escape suffocation.
On the afternoon of April 13th, Major Anderson agreed to a truce, and he evacuated Fort Sumter the next day. Despite the artillery bombardment and the fire, there was no loss of life on either side of the conflict. But by another reckoning, over 600,000 would die as a result of the firing on Fort Sumter, because the war had well and truly begun, and there would be no looking back. Citing the presidential powers given in the Militia Acts of 1792, Lincoln called for the remaining states of the Union to send troops to recapture the forts and preserve the Union against insurrection. Initially, Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers who would serve for 90 days. In the face of this call, 4 more states, Tennessee, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Virginia, seceded. Though they had resisted calls to join the Confederacy for months, they refused to support a military response against their fellow Southern states. To reward Virginia, birthplace of Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and many other founding fathers, Richmond, Virginia, became the capital of the Confederacy. Abraham Lincoln reached out to one prominent Virginian, a 25-year veteran, and offered him command of the Union Army. Robert E. Lee, son of Revolutionary War hero Light Horse Harry Lee, declined the offer. On April 20th, he resigned his commission in the U.S. Army, and on the 23rd, he took command of Virginia's forces. In the early days of the war, both the Union and Confederacy had an easy time raising volunteers. As far south as Tallulah, Louisiana, a young woman named Kate Stone wrote of her brother's desire to fight for the Confederacy.
May 15th. My brother started at daybreak this morning for New Orleans. He goes as far as Vicksburg on horseback. He is wild to be off to Virginia. He so fears that the fighting will be over before he can get there that he has decided to give up the plan of raising a company and going out as a captain. He has about 50 men on his rolls, and they and Uncle Bo have empowered him to sign their names as members of any company he may select. Mama regrets so that my brother would not wait and complete his commission. He could get his complement of men in 2 weeks, and having been educated at a military school gives him a great advantage at this time. And we think there will be fighting for many more days.
Indeed, there would be. Kate Stone's brother returned 10 days later, having missed the company he hoped to join.
He joined the Jeff Davis Guards at Vicksburg and was elected 3rd lieutenant. It is an Irish company officered by Americans. They leave for Richmond on Monday, and so my brother and Uncle Bo get off in the morning as early as possible. The potting will be dreadful for Mama. She so depends on my brother, her oldest and best beloved. The boys are disgruntled because they cannot go too.
The North was also able to attract a large number of volunteers. Jacob Dolson Cox was a Republican senator of Ohio who was later commissioned a brigadier general in the Ohio militia. He described the response to Lincoln's call for volunteers.
The great mass of the people of the North, forgetting all party distinctions, answered with an enthusiastic patriotism that swept politicians off their feet.
But although some states, such as Ohio, were enthusiastic, they had much to do to be prepared for war.
When Mr. Lincoln issued his first call for troops, the existing laws made it necessary that these should be fully organized and officered by the several states. Then, the Treasury was in no condition to bear the burden of war expenditures. Until Congress could assemble, the President was forced to rely on the states to furnish the means necessary for the equipment and transportation of their own troops. The governor spoke of the embarrassment he felt at every step from the lack of practical military experience in his staff, and of his desire to have someone on whom he could properly throw the details of military work.
That someone to whom the Ohio governor turned would later be responsible for organizing the Union's Army of the Potomac, George B. McClellan.
At the time, McClellan's name was a good deal associated with that of Beauregard. They were spoken of as young men of similar standing in the Engineer Corps of the Army, and great things were expected of them both because of their scientific knowledge of their profession, though McClellan had been in civil life for some years. His report on the Crimean War was one of the few important memoirs our old Army had produced, and was valuable enough to give a just reputation for comprehensive understanding of military organization, and the promise of ability to conduct the operations of an army.
Nonetheless, men were flocking to enlist.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.